What? Another YouTube video talking about Star Wars? You're kidding. There's so few of those. Alright, so I've made a few videos talking about my thoughts on Star Wars, both in the past and present. I've done them on, these videos, Doug Rambles. I've done them on Nostalgia Critic. So, yeah, you could argue, is there really that much left that I have to say? And I try not to talk about it unless I have what I think is something, kind of interesting, I think worth talking about. And something I've heard a lot from people that just hate Star Wars right now, say it's the worst thing ever, blah, 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 is bring back Lucas. And if you were to ask this maybe, 20 years ago or something like that, everyone would say, get rid of Lucas. What are you, crazy? He's nuts. Like, he constantly ruined Star Wars over and over and over. But it did get me thinking about something recently that I never really thought about before when it comes to Lucas and Star Wars, or maybe I did, but I think could really connect to what's going on now with Star Wars. And before I talk about that, I guess I should give my thoughts just super, super quick on my thoughts on Star Wars in general, what kind of a fan I am, because that's definitely going to play a big part in what you think about Star Wars, because there are people that kind of treat it like a religion now. I mean, there even were back then. People have always made jokes about that. I like the original movies. I didn't like the prequels. I'm definitely not an apologist for that. I'm a massive maker-funner of those movies. And then I discovered Clone Wars late, but I did really, really enjoy it, the show. Like, that's one of the better Star Wars things to come out. And then in terms of recent Star Wars, when Disney took it over, it's been very hit or miss. I think you can definitely say there's more misses now than hits, but the hits for me are kind of worth it. I like seeing Clone Wars come back. I wasn't the biggest fan of Rebels, but there's things in there that I think are some of the best in Star Wars. Andor is phenomenal. I love the way Mandalorian started off. I think it had a very weak ending. And then, there's some stuff in between, like I think Ahsoka is alright, there's a few of those shows. And then there's stuff that's just spectacularly bad. Like, I loved Obi-Wan for how bad it was. Parts of Rise of Skywalker are kind of so bad they're good, but it's mostly just lame. Overall, I don't see it as like this huge giant F up where everything has just gone, straight to hell. Because I do see some really good stuff that comes out of it. I'm not someone that says, burn Kathleen Kennedy, anything like that. But I do think she's in that group of people, along with like Spielberg and Zemeckis, Frank Marshall and all that. I mean, they were a part of this, pretty much like this group. They were all kind of working off each other. That's kind of dated now. It feels like they're a little passe and they're not really catching on to what's being done nowadays. To varying degrees. Like, I think Zemeckis is really far behind on a lot of that. But Spielberg sometimes can, still catch on to what's, kind of inspiring and new and influential. And Kennedy, I guess, is kind of on the lower end of that. I mean, you do definitely have stuff from Star Wars, like I said, that has been very, very cool and inspiring and awesome. Like I said, with Andor and so forth. But there's definitely stuff that isn't and feels very, very dated, very boring on top of that, too. The Acolyte, I didn't hate as much as everyone else did, but I thought was very dull, very underwhelming. So that's my thoughts on Star Wars in general, both past and modern Star Wars. So the question is, well, should Lucas come back? And what was making me sort of ponder this is I was thinking back to Clone Wars, because I really do like that show, and I'm thinking, well, that show wouldn't exist if it wasn't for not just Lucas making Star Wars, but Lucas having these ideas for the prequels. And again, the prequels, I think, are just indisputably bad. Like, it's weird that there's people saying, we want more of that. Like, really? But there are definitely ideas there. But here's the thing. When you look at the first Star Wars movie, I do like the first Star Wars movie, but there have been countless videos talking about Star Wars was saved in the editing, and they're correct. This is still a very imaginative, interesting world. It really borrows a lot, not just from, classic myths, but also borrows from, just things that Lucas liked, like Flash Gordon and stuff like that. And it came together in a way that I don't even think he could imagine, like this blowing up and everything. So from that point on, he always had people helping out. Like, he didn't direct Empire and Jedi, but he had the ideas. He had his vision in there, but even the vision was always changing. Again, you see this by the fact that he keeps editing the movies in different ways. McClunky, what is that about? There's all sorts of things like that are pretty silly and don't make sense, but at the same time, there's still a good foundation. There's still a good idea there. And that got me really thinking about, again, in Clone Wars, where, yes, Lucas made the first Star Wars and had a big hand in the Star Wars movies, but then you also had the prequels, which were entirely him. I mean, mainly just him. I'm sure he had other writers, but he directed all of them. And he handed off this idea of this world and these characters to this other group and said, make a show out of this. And I'm sure Lucas had some input on that, definitely. I'm sure like he looked him over and said, yes, that's good or whatever. He wasn't the main person on that show, Dave Filoni. He was the showrunner pretty much. That was his baby. It was based off of Lucas's idea, but he's the one that took it in this new direction and made this really great show. And this is from a world where people at the time were saying, how could this even work? Compare this world to like A New Hope. I mean, they're just completely different. They don't look alike. They don't talk the same. I mean, everything is just completely off. But Clone Wars came in and said, we're going to work with this. Again, not flawlessly. I mean, a lot of people say they don't like the first few seasons. I think they're still decent, but there are problems with it. There's still Jar Jar in there, but there's other problems too. But they took it in a direction that made more sense, that kind of took this world that had all these plot holes and things that didn't add up and said, okay, well, how can we transform this into something that people can not only follow, but also really, really get into? That is one of the most difficult things to do, make the prequels like really interesting and complex and adult, even though this is supposed to be like a kid show. And there are some episodes that have more of like a kid show focus to it, but others are like really intense and really brutal. I think from that standpoint, maybe Lucas should still be a part of Star Wars, because I think famously known, he had ideas for what was going to be done in the sequel trilogy. Disney said, oh yeah, we'll get on that. Just never touched them. And honestly, they could have been bad. In fact, I'm probably going to put money on the fact that they were probably bad. But I think if you handed them off to other people that could make something with that, you could transform that into something interesting. And on top of that, the birthplace of these ideas would still be involved. And I think that is nice to have. At some point, I'll do like a Disney December review of Acolyte. I'll go into more detail about this, but a lot of people obsessed over stuff that I didn't care about. I mean, things like, that penis head guy wasn't there originally, lightsabers can't whip it. I don't give a goddamn about any of that. I have this weird thing where I focus on the characters and story. I'm really nuts that way, and that wasn't very good in there. But something that they did, I did go, boy, that doesn't feel right. That does kind of feel like a betrayal of the original idea. Without going too much into spoilers, is that it's an idea I didn't even like in the prequels, where Anakin is just kind of born from nothing and, kind of like a Jesus thing. And I'm like, well, that's really lame and kind of hitting it on the nose, hammering it in and stuff like that. But at the same time, because the character doesn't turn out to be really this messiah, if anything, he's, they say he's going to bring balance. Well, he kind of brought it the other way, didn't it? I mean, he made things get worse as opposed to better. And then, Luke came along and kind of balanced things out again. So I like the idea that, okay, we'll serve this person appears from nothing, which again, it is pretty silly, but then what can you read from that where the character does not really make things better? If anything, his son does. Can you say, well, that then, the essence of that person is still in there from that nothing, or even from that nothing that becomes something bad, it can transform into something good with the next offspring. There's things you can read into it that are kind of interesting, even though it has kind of a shaky foundation, in my opinion, a very lame foundation. I think you could have done better. And something that the show does, they have these characters that do that again. I think they do it twice. In fact, they're like, oh yeah, no, it's whatever, black magic mixed with science and stuff like that. It's kind of these witches. I don't know if they're like a version of the witches from Clone Wars. I don't know, but it's one of these things where it's like, okay, yeah, this is just something they can do now, and they're still like, whoa, you can do that? That's not a common thing in this universe. But I think it's very clear Lucas wanted that to be a one-time thing, where from nothing this person is born. And now they're hinting very, very, very strongly that Anakin comes from something similar. There was never anything in the Lucas stories that indicated this could happen again. Where with this, I don't think you can really get that many interesting ideas from it, or that many interesting theories, and I feel it goes against what the original idea was, or at least the foundation of that idea that could spawn other theories. So from that standpoint, I do kind of think maybe there is something to bringing Lucas back to work on this world again, just to be an idea man, like an Imagineer, if you will, just someone that comes up with the ideas, then hands it off to somebody else to make it work. Maybe there is something there. I don't know if it would make sense to do now, though. Star Wars has gone now this different direction. It hasn't. That's what's so weird. Like, there is still a lot of repeating the same thing. They rhyme. I hate the fact that he ruined that line, because I love that line. I always like that idea of, like, you're not doing the same thing again. You generate something new, but it's very similar to the past. It's not just a repeat. I like that line. I hate that he ruined it because he made such bad, crappy prequels. Like Jar Jar's the key. Stuff like that. Like he ruined that. But I don't mind that idea, but I do feel like there's a lot of just straight up repeating, honestly. And there are times where I feel like it rhymes, but other times where I feel like you're just doing the same thing. You don't want to venture too far out. And honestly, you can kind of see why, if someone even, changes one minute thing that most viewers don't care about. I mean, there's like online petitions to get rid of the entire thing. I mean, there's so many different viewpoints of what Star Wars is now. There's Star Wars fatigue the same way there's like superhero fatigue. There's just something we're sick of and we're getting too much of. And what made Star Wars kind of interesting, even with, the lame prequels, they're kind of events. Somebody used to talk about Robert De Niro movies the same way. Now when he makes a movie, well, whatever, it's just another De Niro movie. But back then when he did a movie, people were like, whoa, this is an event. Why is he choosing this movie? Why is he doing this one? What does this mean? There was weight behind it. And now I feel like whenever a Star Wars anything comes out, there's not as much weight around. It has to earn the weight, which I do like. I do like that it has to try harder to justify itself. But I don't even know. I saw a trailer for another one. I just saw this suburban neighborhood in there, and I'm just like, all right, I don't see this as Star Wars. But who knows? I mean, they could connect it in some way where I'm like, whoa, that was brilliant. But kind of unlikely. The more I see modern things in Star Wars, the more I usually don't like it. I hate that cafe in Attack of the Clones. I don't like Luke's hippie haircut. I don't like Han Solo's disco shirt. That's all stuff that just dates it, in my opinion. But I do see the value in getting lost in a world and getting lost in a mythos even, and getting lost with these characters and everything. So I do see the value in it. I guess when it goes wrong, I don't let it ruin my day, kind of thing. Like, I play a character who gets super, super angry and just he always feels betrayed and everything. But I really don't think about it that much after. I like talking about it, as I'm doing here. I like talking about when something doesn't work, especially when it hilariously doesn't work. I think that's great fun. But yeah, and there are times where I'm certainly going to be disappointed. Oh man, I really wish it would go this direction. My thought is always that the more you can hear someone's point of view on something and discuss it and really take it in, the more you can find out about a person, and it's actually kind of interesting. Even if somebody hates something, you hear why and you have a conversation, you can really find out more about that person. So again, I think that's taking something that somebody would see as really bad, kind of turning into something positive, something that can, make you connect more. And you can do that through stuff you dislike and connect it to stuff that you have liked in the past, or vice versa, something you didn't like and something became very, very good. I didn't have high hopes for Andor. It just looked like a nothing show to me. Rogue One's okay, but can you really do a show? Who even was that guy in Rogue One? I barely remember. But now it's my favorite Star Wars thing. Should Lucas come back? Right now, I don't know. In terms of just coming up with the ideas, I think there might be something there. And I think that could have helped still unify the Star Wars world that has been created. I don't know if it makes sense to bring him back now, because it has gone a different enough direction. But where's it gonna go now? I mean, is anyone excited about where it's gonna go? It would go a different direction than it is currently. And then I think that would also be really cool to sort of settle with people. All right, well, did this work bringing him back? Is this something we should have done from the beginning? Or no, were his ideas just always not very good, and people now can't even salvage it, or he's out of ideas, kind of thing. At least it'd be good to know for certain. I think that'd be really interesting. With that said, I'd love to know your thoughts. Do you think that, at the very least, they should have gone off of his original ideas to see kind of what he had in mind and what he was trying to shape for this world, and maybe give it to people who were better sculptors than he was? That's probably the idea. He has a great idea for a sculpture, and then you hand it to an actual character, to make it happen. Do you think that should have happened? Or do you think, nah, there was just nothing there. He just got lucky a few times. He always handed it off to the right people, and the prequels were terrible, and he was just going to make it worse? Or do you think just Star Wars should kind of slow down? I feel like a lot of people with everything Disney right now is saying, yeah, just slow down with stuff, because we're just not getting those pure movies or those pure shows where it feels like a lot of focus and energy is going into it. There's like too many deadlines. There's too much trying to meet that quota of getting enough merchandise out and all that stuff. I'd love to know your thoughts on that. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time. Take care.